Right. I will kick off. Good evening to everybody. My name's Mark Wood. I'm chair of Barnardo's, which I'm sure you all know. And I'm also chair of Goodstack, which some of you will have come across, which is a tech startup which helps channel funding to charities, but also manages validation to access things like Google discounts. And I'll come back around to talking about my role there later. This is a great evening of presentations arranged very well by Charity Digital, and thanks. I'm delighted to have been asked to host it, and it's all around the role of the trustee as a digitally informed member of the board. Something I know we all wrestle with and is becoming more and more important. So we've got a lineup of very good speakers. I want to first of all kick off by thanking the sponsors of this webinar today, who are Burgess Hodgson, the accountancy and tax and business firm. I think Charity Digital, is a registered UK charity, and they are trying to help all charities in this country increase their impact by being more digital. Slides that are shared tonight will be available, so don't worry if you've missed anything. And closed captions are available for today's session. To enable these in the bottom of the Zoom window, click the up arrow button next to closed caption. During the webinar, please ask questions in the Q&A section, which is located on the Zoom menu bar for us to address them. If you encounter any sound or image issues, please let us know in the chat, and we'll do our best to get the session back to normal as soon as we can. At the end, I'll share a feedback form, and if you could reference that, if you could fill that in, that would be very helpful for feedback. By the way, Charity Digital is hosting an in-person trustee event in London on the 3rd of June, and we'll keep you informed of the details when we have them. So tonight we have three speakers. Ross McCulloch, founder of the Third Sector Lab, and on why digital belongs on the board agenda. Jahana Khan, Customer Success Team Manager of Expense In. And this is going to be a very important session on strengthening financial oversight in charities. And finally, Ben Wilson, Assistant Director, External Relations at the Charity Commission on embracing digital innovation. And after that, I will do a 15-minute Q&A session on what we're doing at Barnardo's. We've started to implement AI tools in various parts of the organization, and I'll talk a bit about that. And I'll talk about the kind of new tools being developed by Goodstack to help charities and other non-profits access funding. So with that, I'm going to hand over now to Ross McCulloch of Third Sector Lab. And over to you, Ross. Take it away. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to try a share screen. We'll see how we get on. Hopefully everyone can see that fine. I can't see anyone from a thumbs up. Mark, can you see that okay? Yeah, cool. Perfect. Okay, okay. So,
Yeah.
as Mark said, I'm Ross McCulloch. I'm the founder of Third Sector Lab. I have been working in Charity Digital for a very, very long time. So I got a nice update on LinkedIn the other day to remind me how old I am by telling me that I've been working at Third Sector Lab for 18 years. So it's been a long shift. I was previously head of comms with a national charity. Before that, one of the programs of work that we deliver called Digital Trustees is one of the big kind of themes that I'm going to talk about today and why digital needs to be on the board agenda. And if it's not, maybe thinking today what you can do differently and how you might recruit the right person that's going to take you on that journey. You can find out a wee bit more information at the link, so thirdsectorlab.co.uk/digital-trustees. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy chatting about this stuff if you want a nat about it as well. So, I thought it was worthwhile just kind of starting the whole session with really a thought about like when we talk about digital, what are we actually talking about? And what I've tended to find over the years is that your board, whether they have really articulated this or not, will each have something that is quite different when it comes to digital in their head. So for some of them, it'll be about IT infrastructure. For some of them, it'll be purely the way that you communicate online. For some, it might be about online fundraising. And for the sake of this, and for the sake of thinking about who is the person we need on our board to drive this change, what I'd like to be thinking about is digital transformation as this three intersecting areas of people, process, and technologies. And really, it only works where we get these three things right. So, what we're moving away from is seeing our board as a kind of rubber stamp machine through to digital procurement. And actually, our board is one of the most important vehicles in terms of leadership and changing the culture in the organisation and getting our broader staff team and volunteers geared up to think about what digital means in 2026 and how it provides you with a competitive advantage. And in the age of AI as well, how does it drive efficiencies that mean you can deliver much more for the work that you're fundraising or the grants that you're receiving as well? So, keeping that in mind, when we're thinking about digital today, we're not just talking about buying technology, we're not talking just about tools. In many ways, that's the easy part of it. Getting the culture, skills, and training right and thinking about those ways of working is really critical. And this is where a good digital trustee comes in. They are not just the steward of your new CRM system or your new website, but actually, how do we become a data driven board? How do we encourage frontline staff to use that CRM effectively in their day to day? Okay, so Charity Digital Skills Report, which most of you are probably pretty familiar with, it comes out of some of the work that Zoe Amar does. Still pretty much the kind of national benchmark of where the charity sector is. There's going to be a 2026 report that's going to be launched, I think, in the next couple of weeks. There'll probably be a slight change in some of these figures that I'm showing you just now. We still have a very, very low number of charities that have a strategy in place for digital. Now, that could literally just be a whiteboard in your office or a one pager or thinking about how you weave digital strategy into your organizational strategy or business plan, but still a very, very low number of people that are reporting that they actually have something written down that kind of talks about how they're going to achieve organizational goals through the medium of digital. 63% feel they've made good digital progress, and post-pandemic, that number has been increasing quite a lot. I'm going to pick up, I know there's kind of questions coming in the chat. I'll pick them up at the end of the slides if we've got time. 76% of charities using AI in their day to day. It's probably much higher than that now. Probably the 2026 report will see that being much higher. What I'd love you to think about, and this is particularly where a digital trustee comes in, is the difference between using AI to generate some copy for a social media post versus a frontline team using AI to scrutinize beneficiary data so they can provide a better service to people. One of them is fairly safe and low level. One of them provides potential huge efficiencies for the organization, but also provides you with lots and lots of risk potential in your organization as well. What are the governance questions around AI in your organization at the moment? Most charities saying that their trustees have low digital skills or room for improvement. Lots of charities don't have a digital trustee at all. And when we're thinking about this term, we use the term digital quite openly and broadly. So generally, it scoops up digital data and design. And that could be anything from a service designer to a developer to a data analyst. So when we're talking about digital trustees, we're thinking about quite a broad church. We all know that small to medium charities, particularly, faced with squeezed finances, if you don't have someone on your board who's going to help you think about how you make the most of the money that you've got, can you get someone that's going to help you do that? And 56% are not engaging with emerging tech. AI is not an emerging piece of technology yet. It is here and it's in the here and now. There's huge risks, but there's huge potentials. Who's the person that's leading that in your organization? What I'm going to get you to do, a quick kind of task. This is kind of weird because I can't see you all because it's a webinar, but we'll do it through the chat box on Zoom. I want you to think about a time that you had a good service experience online, and I would like you to describe what made that service so good in one word. So use the one word, and also for the benefits, because I can't see any of you, if you could write down what the service was. So it could be renewing your road tax, it could be maybe you returned a parcel. So pop your questions in the box. So if you can talk about, like, if it was your road tax, just write road tax, and maybe the one word you'd use is quick. So if we can all pop that in just now. So a good experience you've had online, personally or professionally. Tell me what the service was and what made it so good in one word. So there we go. First one in, speed, car permit renewal. They can't all be car based, by the way. So here we go. An online form to report lost property. I love it. Monzo banking, a refund process, car insurance, helpful. An Amazon purchase, other online places are available. Booking in a service for your car. Getting travel advice from ChatGPT. Lovely. Uh, I had the first time this has happened to me this week where someone got in touch on LinkedIn and they got in touch because they had a conversation with Google Gemini. They were a tech professional, they wanted to do some volunteering. Through that conversation, they realised that being on a board might be interesting for them. Google Gemini recommended they directly speak to me and look at our Digital Trustees program, and they came and got in touch with us via LinkedIn. First referral we've had through a conversation that's happened on an AI chat. So, yeah, loads of good stuff there. Filing your tax return, efficient banking, quick, Oyster card renewal, easy. What I'd love you to think about is all these words that are coming through here. So easy, quick, efficient, intuitive, all of these words. Does that reflect the digital services that your charity is delivering right now? And if it doesn't, how are you going to get to that place? And if it doesn't, who is the person on your board right now that can lead that change in your organization? And if you don't have them, how might you find that person that's going to lead that change? So we're thinking, what is the strategic leadership that's going to get you to that point where the services you deliver feel like the Oyster card renewal or feel like paying your tax bill? Maybe not as painful as paying your tax bill. Okay, so the work that we're doing through Digital Trustees is really matchmaking people from the tech sector with people in the charity sector. We run a cohort model. At the moment, we work with the Robertson Trust, National Lottery Community Fund in Scotland, and the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. We're recruiting for our March cohort. If you get funding from one of those three organisations, you can apply for a fully funded place. If you're in the room from a membership body or a funder and you want to speak about how we can support you with Digital Trustees, then reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would love to chat. But really, what we do is we help charities benchmark where they're at in their journey, articulate where digital data and design are going to help them achieve organisational goals in 2026 and beyond, and then translate that into plain English so that they can think about who's the person that we're going to recruit on our board. So if your organisation has a data problem, who's the data analyst we're going to help find? If you need an all-rounder, maybe we're going to help you recruit someone like we're recently trying to find a board position for the Deputy Director of Digital at the National Lottery in England and Wales. Maybe you need someone to lead kind of transformational change around being more user-centered, and what you need is a UX designer or a service designer in your organisation. So we can help translate what are the problems you're trying to solve, where does digital come into that, and who's the type of person that might lead that from the board perspective. Now, I read a thing the other day, which I'm going to disagree with, and I'm not going to say which website it was on, but a kind of slightly provocative article saying we do not need digital trustees anymore because we're like post that as a thought. Now, I get the point of the article. So one of the things we've always spoken about is the fact that you cannot put all the onus for digital data and design on one person. That is ridiculous. But you need someone who is going to lead that on your board, the same way that you will have a finance expert on your board. And if you don't, probably your charity at the moment is slightly in panic stations because you're thinking about how do we get someone who's a finance expert. Now, that does not mean that the finance person takes all the responsibility for the accounts and everything else to do with finance. That is a collective responsibility, but you need someone who's an expert at reading a set of accounts who can steward people to think about the decisions that board is making and the things that they are seeing in front of them. So I want you to treat it as seriously as that. And this is a kind of a slight aside, but I'm going to throw this in here. When you're thinking about recruiting a digital trustee and you're thinking about getting digital on the board agenda, I want you to think about what board diversity looks like in your organisation right now. And I want you to use this as an opportunity to try and recruit for a much more diverse board. We all know that diverse boards make better decisions, but we also know that less than 3% of charity trustees are under 30. Less than 8% of charity trustees are from Black and Asian backgrounds. And when we look at the 500 biggest charities in the UK, only about 13% have gender parity on the board. So there's a lot of work still to be done. I don't know if this fact still holds, but I read something recently that there's more men called John on boards in the UK than there are women. So that tells you quite a lot of what you need to know. I'm going to look at a couple of case studies and then we'll look at a couple of other things and then we'll kind of finish up and get a chance for Q&A because I know I need to finish at 6 sharp, just to make sure that other speakers can get a chance to come in. Um, yeah, it's a really good point from Maria in the chat there. Okay, so Hannah is a really nice example. A young person who joined the board. Hannah is a really experienced user researcher with Neon Tribe. She's had a huge impact on Cycling Without Age England. Now, she came in with someone who was going to be looking at user-centered design in the organization, but that was also at a point in time where they were about to procure a new CRM system, so a customer relationship management system. And Hannah's work at getting that organization to truly think about its users meant that implementing that CRM became a much less painful process. So that user experience focus that she brought to the organization meant that they were not just thinking about the people who use the services, but they were also thinking about internal teams and volunteers as users as well. So users of that CRM, what do those teams need out of that? So that's been a big transformation in that organization where Cycling Without Age England is now a much more user-focused organisation than they were before, and a lot of that has been led from the board into an operational level by Hannah. Hugh, quite a senior role that Hugh works on, and we helped him get a board position. Hugh's the Chief Information Officer with Research Data Scotland. One of the big things that we will do as part of this process is I do a lot of talks at kind of tech sector events. We'll have stands at tech events as well and talk to people in the tech sector. Lots of people who work in digital data and design do not even know what being a charity trustee is. They don't think governance is for them. It's a thing they might do when they retire. So a big part of our work is to kind of educate people in that sector. And what I would love to see is a move away from what can be quite tokenistic tech volunteering. People parachute in, they build an app or something else that the charity doesn't really quite need or doesn't really know why they're getting built this thing. The person then leaves, and then the charity is left with this legacy bit of technology that is not the thing they would love. Now, what I would like to see is more people from the tech sector taking a longer term commitment and actually much shorter time frames spread over those months or quarters that they're going to be a trustee, but they might be sitting there for 3 years or 5 years. And what I'd love you to be thinking about on the charity side is, do we need a full trustee? This might be a board advisory role. Maybe we are going through a new CRM process or a new digital platform and we need someone to steward that at the board level. Maybe we're going to create a short-term 18-month board position. So I'd love you to be a wee bit more thoughtful about what those board positions might look like in those terms rather than everyone just fitting into that same cookie cutter approach. So, if you're interested in this stuff, you can go on our website, so Third Sector Lab website, click the Digital Trustees tab. You can find a digital trustee. There's about 80 live profiles of people on there right now. You can reach out to those people and you can set up a conversation with them. We exist somewhere between kind of just putting out a kind of vague job ad and then going through very, very formal recruitment. So you should still do your due diligence. You should still get people to fill out a formal application, still interview people. What you can do is if you go on the platform and if Danielle's still looking for a trustee role, you can click that and you can set up a coffee conversation with her and you can chat to her about what your needs are and where she's a fit. You can look at her profile and it'll tell you what her skill set is and what she's looking for and take a much more relaxed approach to trustee recruitment. And often that is what's missing in trustee recruitment. It's formalised to the point where people don't engage until far, far too late into the process. You can apply for a March cohort. So if you get funding from National Lottery Community Fund Scotland, Esme Fairbairn Foundation or Robertson Trust, you can grab a fully funded place on that. Even if you can't come on the March cohort, we still have the opportunity for you to create an open organisational profile. So all those organisations you can see on the right-hand side takes you through a few questions in a form, creates a live profile, and we can also use that to help with a bit of matchmaking behind the scenes as well. Okie dokie. Right. This is probably my biggest bit of advice when we're thinking about all this stuff. And I think thinking in the context of what does digital mean on the board agenda and why do we need to get more strategic about digital is we're transforming to preserve the how, not to match the why. So we're not putting a digital sticking plaster on that really rubbish form that we have that's maybe a paper-based form at the moment. We're thinking about why are we doing this stuff in the first place? So for me, a good digital trustee and a good approach to a digital strategy is about getting back to the fundamentals of why your organization was set up. And what we're thinking about is how do we design the most effective services to make that happen? And digital might be part of the mix, and a digital trustee can help take you on that journey. So I'm going to stop speaking And I think we've got a wee bit of time. Yeah, we've got about kind of 9 minutes or so, so we've got a chance for questions just now. I will stop sharing. Yeah, and then we can pick them up. I don't know if Mark, if you've been keeping an eye on chat, if there's any coming in, or if anyone wants to pop them in chat, and we can pick those up.
I've got one I'll kick off with, Ross. You
Mm.
mentioned something that I think is quite interesting, is that you can set up board advisory roles. You don't have to appoint a full trustee,
Yeah.
if that makes more sense. If you've got seen good experience of that as well as, I mean, I love this platform with candidates. Are they also candidates to be advisors?
Yeah, so to be honest, most of the people that come to us have not thought about being a trustee. Like they've thought about being a trustee because we've had a conversation with them about it. Most people are quite amenable to being an advisor or a full trustee. What we've tended to find is particularly younger people might be more comfortable doing something that feels like a shorter term intervention. So the idea of like being in your 20s and being told you're going to be on this board for 3 years or 5 years is quite scary for most of them.
Daunting, yeah.
On the flip side, what I would love to encourage more charities to do is allow board shadowing. So before someone's even got to,
Yeah.
I'm fully going to be a trustee, can I shadow this board? Am I a cultural fit for this board? Does this board feel dysfunctional and I want nothing to do with it? So all the questions that we can't really get under the kind of bonnet of, but that actually we can answer some of those things when we do things like board shadowing.
That's a very good idea. We've been discussing this on the Bernardo's board because we have got a very good artificial intelligence implementation program, and we've been looking for expertise. And we've come across the same issue, saying actually we might get candidates who just want to do this for 6 months or a year and help,
Yeah.
as opposed to committing for long term. And
Yeah.
so we're evaluating that as an option.
Yeah, a good example coming from a bad place, but a couple of charities we've worked with who have had cyber breaches in 2025, and actually for 2026, a big priority for them is recruiting a cyber expert. Now, that person might only be on the board for a year or a year and a half, or maybe 2 years, to kind of build the culture around cyber and make sure that the right technology is in place and approaches. That might not be a permanent, ongoing board role. And that's also, I guess, for me about that person's role is to kind of build a culture amongst governance, but also operationally that cybersecurity is important and it's everyone's job.
Yeah, exactly right. A question here. How receptive are this population to pro bono working? That's a very good point.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, like it's very rare for me to speak to someone in the tech sector who doesn't want to do something with charities.
Mm,
What you tend to find is they are very, very time poor. And in a weird way, being on a board is kind of the most appealing volunteering opportunity they might get because it's not that time intensive compared to a lot of other volunteering opportunities. Most boards now will either be hybrid or fully remote, so it's quite easy to
yeah,
access. The other thing I would say is like if you've got written into your memorandums and articles that someone has to live within 10 miles, maybe a chance to rethink that. Is that the most appropriate thing? Because your talent pool becomes quite limited, and particularly if you live in a rural area and you've built that in, but you can't recruit the right person who's going to help you with technology because they just simply do not live close. So being quite receptive to people engaging from a much broader area. There's another layer to this that like is too big for me to deal with, and it's definitely not for these slides today. But lots of boards, like the way that they communicate and make decisions and meet, are not fit for purpose in 2026. And
yeah,
this is an opportunity to rethink the way that you do that. I have been to countless board meetings, talked to them about digital trustees, and I am literally at the end of a very long table being held up by someone on a laptop as I talk to an entire room. So if we know that hybrid and remote working is like the norm, it has been post-pandemic, how do we set up boards so that they're kind of geared up for that as well?
yeah. We've got a couple of questions, then we'll come back to Andy Carriage's question as well.
Yep.
So, yes, one question. It's not just about tenure for younger or inexperienced people. It's a significant legal risk. Is that something to worry about? And then a question from Andrew Barton. Are the advisory roles still governance or are they pro bono consultancy?
Yeah, so in terms of the legal side, so another piece of work we run called the Curve, which is a training program that we run. We give people who come through either the cohorts or come through as professionals, we give them access to basically a space in there that we've created, which is a lot of learning around governance and digital. And that some of that is stuff that we've created. Some of it is drawn on best practice, so things like the Charity Commission stuff. Obviously, like Oscar in Scotland. SCVO have got a thing called the Good Governance Guide, which has got a lot of stuff that explains in plain English your legal responsibilities. It is important that people understand that stuff and they're not just feeling like they're just jumping into any old volunteering role. So we're quite clear on doing that, but there's also a bit where there needs to be due diligence on the part of the applicant and on the charity as well. So I think the legal side of it's part of it, but as a potential trustee, is the charity you're about to join the board of going to go bust in the next 3 months?
Yeah.
Do you need to do legal checks on the person who might be co-opted onto your board because of the type of charity you are? So you still need to do the due diligence, and I think from both sides, not just from the charity side. Um, yeah, I'll pick up the bit. Are the advisory roles still governance? Are they pro bono? Kind of depends how you set it up as an organisation. So we use the term digital trustees as a bit of a catch-all term to talk about governance. Our focus, and 90% of the people that come through become full trustees. A handful of people, depending on what the charity's needing to do, will come in advisory roles. Now that's where the kind of cohort model I spoke about before. Part of
Mm,
our job is to support charities to think about, is this a short-term board role? Do you need longer-term support? Or are you looking just actually for an advisory role because you've bought a very expensive CRM and you need to do some due diligence around it, and there's a
mm.
6 month window and that's going to be put in place. So there's various options, but yeah, I think thinking about governance in a much more broad, holistic sense. There was another question as well there, Mark, that I didn't pick up on.
Thank you. Thank you. There was one that was asked earlier, Andy Kerridge. Can you give an example of a digital strategy? Where do we start, and what are the essential elements?
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting. I do a lot of work with SCVO's digital team up here. A guy called John Fitzgerald who writes quite a lot on digital strategy. And one of the things he wrote, maybe like start of last year, was like, here is why a digital strategy template is next to useless. And then as the year kind of went on, he's kind of more come round to the thinking that actually there's merit in a structure less than a template. So what we've seen is like there's a lot of digital strategy templates floating around there. The problem with them is they'll shoehorn every charity's unique needs into one one structure. When actually really what we're thinking about is like what are you trying to achieve in 2026? So what is in your business plan or your organizational strategy? And then what we're thinking about is where does digital data and design have a role to deliver the things that are in that organizational strategy or business plan? And kind of there's two options really. Have a standalone small strategy so that people can really focus on digital, or have a digital strategy that's woven into your overall organizational
Mm,
strategy. The big things that I would say, the kind of core components that will tend to be in it, regardless of what it is, using data for decision making. What does that look like in your organization? Do we have a user-centered culture? And so by that, I mean that all the stuff that sits in our strategy, have we actually done the robust work to understand what our users want and need in 2026? Are we cyber secure? How do we use that as a competitive advantage, not just as a kind of risk element? Trying to get people to think about, and this probably for me is one of the bigger ones, like start to finish digital services. So when you look at all those digital services you described, or everyone put in around like renewing your road tax, returning a parcel, all of those things, you have a start and an end point in those. Lots of charities have good digital services, but there is no start point. There's literally no form to onboard onto it. So I pick up the phone, I phone you, or I fill out a vague form that might go to an admin person and might get sent to the right person. I often have no control of my own data as a user. I
mm.
often don't really know when that service is going to end or what it looks like when it ends as well. So trying to build a culture where our strategy in 2026 has some thought about start to end digital services.
Yeah, brilliant. Great stuff. I think we've just hit 6 o'clock, so
Perfect.
and no more open questions. Thank you, Ross. That was a very, very interesting presentation. Thank you. And I
Grand.
think the
Thank you so
slides
much.
will be in much demand, so I think that's been brilliant.
Great.
What's this one? Just before we close?
Yep.
Yeah. If you can find a young person who loves technology and is happy to learn on the job, their creativity can be a massive advantage. And being on site gives them the ability to see what solutions you truly need as an organization. Our digital trustee created remote access, keyless door entry, smart control conditioning. Yeah,
Amazing.
that's a
That's a
good
brilliant
example.
example. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great place to finish on.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you, Ross. I
Thank you
know
so much. Right.
you've got to jump and
Got a
leave,
dash. Yeah.
but thank you for contribution.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
Bye,
And
everyone.
now I'm going to move on to Johanna Khan, who's with Expense In. And Johanna, if I can get you to kick off.
Hi everyone. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll just quickly share my screen and just to sh check, is that visible? Can you see the screen share
Yep,
there?
that's all visible.
Excellent. Brilliant. So, hi everyone. I hope you're all well. For this presentation, I'll be looking at digital confidence, specifically what it means for trustees navigating an increasingly digital landscape. Trustees are expected to make informed decisions and provide strong strategic direction. But that confidence is often tested when it comes to finances, especially around visibility, control, and oversight. So, in this aspect of the session, we'll be exploring where digital confidence commonly breaks down in the charity in sorry, can't speak today, in charity finance and what looks good in practice. The goal is to essentially give you all clarity, practical ideas, and a greater confidence in financial governance within a digital environment. So, before we dive in, just a quick introduction. I am Johanna. I work closely with our customers at Expense In, many of which are charities and not for profit organizations, essentially to help them get the most value from our expense management platform. A big part of my role is understanding how different organizations operate and where their expense process creates friction, whether that's for finance teams, trustees, or staff and volunteers. So here's a quick overview of what I'll be covering today. I'll start with the current pressures on trustees, the changing regulatory landscape, rising financial scrutiny, and why this context matters. Then we'll look at the real challenges charities are facing, particularly where trustees often feel less confident around financial oversight and digital processes. Then we'll look at the real, oh, sorry. Um, yeah, from there, we'll explore how trustees can build confidence through greater clarity of data, visibility, and controls. And I'll move on to what rebuilding financial confidence looks like in practice and how stronger oversight doesn't need to add complexity or workload. After that, I'll walk you through a practical expense in demo to show how these principle works in everyday workflows. And hopefully, if there is time for questions, I'll wrap up with a Q&A. So let's take a moment to look at the environment trustees are operating in today and why pressure around governance, especially financial oversight, has increased so much. First, there's a growing expectation for real-time data. Donors and funders want up-to-date insight into how money is being used, and delayed information makes transparent decision-making much harder. Digital confidence comes from knowing the data exists and can be accessed when it's needed. Trustees are also expected to plan ahead, not just review the past. But when financial data is slow and requires manual reconciliation, budgets and forecasts become reactive rather than strategic. Security and data protection add another layer of responsibility. Trustees must be confident that any digital tools they approve are secure, compliant, and fit for purpose. Regulatory expectations are rising as well. Boards must now evidence not only that the controls exist, but that they're being followed consistently, which increases scrutiny around financial processes. Many charities are also working with disconnected systems. Often, the tools that are adopted at different times and don't always integrate with one another. This creates manual work, fragmented information, and uncertainty about the accuracy of the overall financial picture. All of this is happening while trustees have limited time and capacity. Expectations keep rising, and balancing those demands with the reality of the available time is a significant pressure. And finally, there's growing pressure to make decisions about AI. Many trustees are figuring out what AI can safely do, how it fits into existing workflows, and what level of oversight is required. This introduces a new uncertainty into digital decision making. So let's take a look at what the evidence tells us when implementing digital finance tools. When we look at the reality of digital finance adoptions across the charity sector, the data tells us a very clear story. So first, 96% of charities say they regret at least one finance software decision they've made. It highlights something very important. Choosing digital tools is hard. It's not that organizations don't want to modernize, it's that the software they choose doesn't always deliver the outcomes that were expected. 97% of charities say that they experienced hidden or unexpected costs. That could be things like extra training, licenses, missing integrations, or additional time demands on the internal teams. For tight budgets, these surprises can be a seemingly good solution, but are very overwhelming. Two-thirds of charities found that the implementation process is stressful for their teams. So when even the technology itself is good, the journey to get there is also very overwhelming. And over half of charities end up using less than 50% of the tools that they've paid for. When platforms feel too complex or onboarding isn't supportive enough, organizations can really only scratch the surface. Taken together, these stats show that the challenge isn't just about adopting the financial tools, it's about adopting the right tools in the right way with the clarity and support needed to make investment worthwhile. So, what matters when implementing digital tools? It's not just about choosing a tool, it's about implementing it in a way that actually works for your organization. Successful digital adoption is shaped far more by the approach than the technology itself. The first thing that matters is having a very clear purpose. Any digital tool should support your wider strategy. When everyone understands the why, the rest of the process becomes much easier to align all around. From there, it's important to develop a structured implementation plan. That doesn't need to be complicated, but it should set out responsibilities, timelines, and what success really looks like. Preparing your data early is another key step. For charities, that might mean thinking about programs, projects, funding, or reporting needs. Getting this right from the start ensures that the digital tools reflect the real financial structure of the organization. It's also crucial to align your internal policies and workflows. Digital tools work best when they reinforce the way your charity operates, when everyone follows a process that feels intuitive and achievable as well. Next is configuring the system to match how your charity actually works. Implementation isn't just a technical exercise, it's about shaping the tool so it reflects your permissions, controls, and the different ways your teams work across programs or locations. Then comes supporting your people. Training and clear guidance are essential. Digital confidence grows when everyone feels equipped and supported. And finally, it's really valuable to review that early usage. Checking in during the first few weeks helps you spot gaps, build consistency, and makes sure that everyone feels confident. Early course correction prevents issues from becoming bigger later on, and then it also reinforces good habits. Together, these steps create an environment where digital tools don't just get installed, they actually deliver value, it strengthens governance, and improves confidence across the whole organization. So, how can trustees build more confidence with digital financial tools? At its core, it's about giving boards the clarity, consistency, and control they need to govern well. And expense management is often where the gap between finance systems and real world spending becomes most obvious, which makes it a really useful example of what good practice looks like. Real time data is a huge part of this. When financial information arrives late, decision making becomes reactive. Expense management tools help close that gap by speeding up receipt capture, keeping submissions and approvals moving, and giving trustees up-to-date visibility across programs and projects. Digital systems should also reduce pressure and not add to it. Many charities still work with disconnected systems like spreadsheets, forms, email chains, which create unnecessary workload and blind spots. Centralizing those systems, for example, with your expenses into one digital process removes a lot of that complexity, and it gives everyone a single reliable view of what's happening. Clear and consistent processes are another key piece. Because expenses touch the staff, volunteers, finance teams, and trustees, a simple, universal workflow improves adoption, reduces risk, and creates fairness across the organization. Replacing the manual task with automation also makes a huge difference. With an expense management system, it can quietly validate claims, picking up missing information, flag anything unusual before it reaches finance. And really, automation with any system will reduce errors. It will remove bottlenecks and means trustees are working from much cleaner and more accurate data. And to make that data more meaningful, spend needs to be mapped consistently to the right projects, events, or programs. When costs are allocated correctly from the start, it strengthens reporting and makes budgeting decisions much more confident. And finally, any digital tool, whether it's for expenses or broader financial oversight, should support the charity's wider strategy. The right tools should help the organization move forward towards where it's heading and not just reflect how things work today. So this takes us to understanding how to rebuild financial confidence. This confidence often starts with simplifying the areas of finance that touch the most people, and expense management is one of the biggest of those areas. Charity finance teams need an approach that's simple, affordable, and genuinely easy for staff and volunteers to use. When everyone follows the same steps, it removes the confusion, reduces risks, and makes the whole system feel much more manageable. Not everyone across a charity is digitally fluent, and that's completely normal. A good expense system should feel intuitive and it should guide people through what they need to do. When claims are mapped to the right projects or programs from the start, it gives trustees a clearer picture of how resources are being used. Moving away from petty cash and manual tracking also improves transparency and it cuts down unnecessary admin. And crucially, all of this should reduce manual work without adding complexity. The right digital approach takes pressure off the busy finance teams while giving trustees visibility and reassurance that they need. And with that in mind, I'd like to show you, how this works in practice. So what I'll do is I'll be moving over to a live demo of expensing. So I'll come out of this presentation and we have expensing here. So with expensing and this demo I'm going to show you all today, it's really just going to be the process of creating, submitting expenses through to approval and then finance. So we can see that full journey for those finance teams right into their accounting package. So what we have here is the expensing web portal. Anyone claiming or submitting expenses is where we'll start first. And with the web portal, it's useful to add here that we have the expense policy. This is a huge part towards the automation and the validation that expensing offers to their customers. Having the policies with the guidelines and rules for these expenses are so important. For example, ensuring receipts are attached to expenses or ensuring that the expenses can only be claimed once. These are all the things that expensing can manage in the background and flag up upon submission. So this is then reducing the manual work for those approvers or finance teams as it's a systematic validation through the system. So what I'll actually move on to is our mobile app. When it comes to creating and submitting expenses, I always like to show the mobile app as, those that are incurring the expenses are often on the go. Being able to snap a receipt in the moment tends to be much easier. And if you're anything like me, I tend to just lose my receipts very quickly. So looking at the mobile app here, we're going to capture the receipt. And I can do this just by clicking the camera icon at the bottom. This will then launch the camera so I can take a photo of my receipt and upload that. So from here, I can add a memo to the receipt. This will simply be the description that will be viewed by the approvers. So I can just quickly enter here. And then I can choose the payment method, which for this time is out of pocket as it's reimbursable. So uploading that, you'll see as the page refreshes, there is an icon at the bottom. So expensing will scan the data within the receipt through its OCR scanning. That will extract information like the date, the merchant, the amount, and the currency. So if I now create this into an expense via selecting this icon and choosing the type, which is a purchase, we'll see the date has been applied, the description and the category has been applied, the merchant is there, and the amount. When it comes to categories, it's useful to add that these categories are set up in the background with the relevant coding for the accountancy package. So when anything is then posted into the accounting package, you know it has been coded correctly. Same can be said with the projects. Projects can be applied for events or programs, and therefore, not only can you map it correctly in the accounting package, you can export reports on this to analyze the spend based on specific events or projects that are done. The rest of the information, as you can see, has been completed. And of course, the user can always add notes if required. But what I'll do is simply save, and we can see this expense is ready to submit. Now, I'm not actually going to submit it just yet, as I will also move back to the web portal. So just refreshing here, you'll see that expense created is already in my draft, and it does sync up seamlessly. I now want to show you how mileage expenses are created. And what I've done is within this receipt section, I've already uploaded a photo of the receipt. We've seen how simple it is to snap a photo from the app. Of course, they can always be uploaded if they're on the computer or forwarded in via email, but I've already got one here. So if I now click on expense, I can choose to create a mileage expense from this. So from here, we have the date applied, we have the category selected, and I can also link it to a project again if required. When it comes to mileage expenses, we have the journey details. Now, this is very useful as Expense-In does integrate with Google Maps for journey distance calculation. So if I simply type in Cardiff to Bristol for my journey that I've done, you'll see the distance has been auto-calculated here. If it is a return journey, I can apply that and it doubles up the distance for the journey back. Additional stops can also be added as well. So if the user has traveled to multiple places, they can do it all within the one expense. If I now create that, we'll see the two expenses have now been created, ready for submission. So if I select these, I'll submit them now. And what we now see is the policy issues that I mentioned earlier. Policies can be created as blocks or they can be warnings. If it's a block, for example, this is identified, I've used this receipt before, it's a duplicate receipt. And ordinarily, you wouldn't want people to be using the same receipts over and over again. So you may want to block that. And that would simply not allow the user to continue. They would have to cancel and either use a new receipt or delete it altogether. Of course, expenses can be set up for warnings for one-off occasions, and I've set it this way for demo purposes, of course. So what I'll do now is I'll ignore that policy and I'll just continue, and that will submit those expenses. So we'll now log out of this process for the user submitting the expenses, and we'll look at this process as an approver to see how that journey flows through. Signing in as an approver, they can actually approve the expenses from the mobile app as well as the web portal. But today, I'll just stick to the web portal going forward. An approver can navigate to the approval section right at the top here, where they can see all of the expenses that have been submitted. Immediately, you can see that there's a policy issue. So straight away, if that expense has gone against the rules applied, it's really easy to see that. And then decide what you would like to do going forward. Of course, the approver would naturally check the information within the expense and cross-check that against the receipt to ensure that they're happy with that information. And with mileage expenses, it's useful to add that Expense-In can calculate the carbon emitted on travel and also accommodation expenses. On top of that, if you are a charity that does claim VAT from HMRC from mileage journeys, Expense-In will calculate how much can be reclaimed, all done systematically, so no one needs to calculate that manually. So from here, what I'm going to do is reject one expense, which will be this one, which is a duplicate, and I'll approve the other. So approvers are always able to explain why they're rejecting the expense. And that will then be visible to the end user so they can understand exactly why it was rejected. For the rest, what I'll do is I will approve, and we can then see the final stage. Of course, the end user will always keep notified with every stage of this as well. So if it does get approved or rejected, they'll receive a notification. But now that we've seen the expense submission and the approval, we'll see the final step, which is the finance process. So within the finance login, we'll see that there is a section specifically for the finance teams. So within this section, we can see an overview. What's very useful here is finance teams get full oversight over every expense within the company. They can see everything in draft, which hasn't yet been submitted. anything awaiting approval, and everything that's been approved. This is all updating in real time, so they can therefore have foresight on these expenses that will soon be coming in. This approved section on the left, I always describe it as essentially a to-do list. This section will show every expense that has been submitted and then approved, and therefore it requires processing into the accounting system. So if I go into reimbursable, for example, we'll see all of these expenses that now need processing. Of course, the finance team is able to expand the expenses just like the approver could. They can cross-check the information from the receipt against the form itself to ensure that they're happy with it. And through these three dots, they can always edit that information if required. So if that project or category had been incorrectly applied, that can be edited for coding purposes. Expenses also can be rejected at this stage as well. Finance always have the final say, so they can ensure that they're happy with what they're processing. So if
Johanna, we're going to have to leave a couple of minutes time for questions. This is good. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. What I'll just say is posting into an accountancy package is very simple and expensing. Going to export here. If you're connected to one of our accountancy packages, you can post in just 2 clicks, just like that, or we offer file exports as well. So I will close up there as we've seen the overview of expensing, and yeah, I'd be happy to go through questions. So I'll just leave that there. I'll see if I can get the questions open. Thank you for that reminder, Mark.
That's right. No, it's good. You're a brave person to go into a live demo, I have to say. So it worked
thank
well.
you so much.
Let me kick off with the question. Size of do you have lots of customers already amongst UK charities, and what sort of size of charities typically? Are they all sizes of charities, or are you particularly working with, a particular area?
Yeah, we work with charity size of many sizes. There's not really a restricted sort of size or recommended size. With expensing, we're scalable. So we work with a lot of smaller charities. What I will say is in this presentation, I didn't get time to get to it, but we work with Brandon Trust, who's left us a quote here. And we also work with, I think that was one before, British Gymnastics.
Yeah, saw that.
But again, yeah, very varied with us.
Fantastic. Very, very easy to use. Brilliant system.
Yes, very important to be intuitive as it is. Most people aren't always fluent with technology, so being able to really work for everyone is very important.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Do we have any questions from our participants? I think you've demonstrated it so comprehensively and so well that nobody's got anything left to ask.
That's always good. Thank you.
Oh, cost. Yes, I've got a question on cost.
Yeah, cost. So when it comes to our pricing, it really varies depending on the requirements. So expense in pricing is dependent on the usage of claiming expenses. It's really difficult to say over a live webinar, really. But if I actually navigate to one of the last slides, we've got our email here. So if you do want to get in touch, we would be happy to have a chat, go through expensing in further detail. And really, if you just want, further information, we can give you that, including costs. So I'll leave this slide here in case anyone wants to.
But importantly, it's affordable for a small charity as well as the larger ones.
Yes, a really important thing, which I think due to time, it's just blanked in my head, but we actually offer a 15% discount for charities. It's really important that we make expensing affordable. So there is that discount applied.
Brilliant. And question from Susan, how does it integrate with different finance systems?
Yep. So we offer integrations through API through companies like Sage, Xero, QuickBooks, as you saw on there. The ones that you saw in the demo aren't all the integrations that we offer. We also offer an open API as well. If you do want to integrate a two-way integration, that is possible with expensing.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Johanna, thank you very much. Very good. Very good presentation.
No problem.
Terrific system. Thank you.
And I'm not sharing. Oh, let me just stop sharing there.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Johanna. I'm going to pass on now to Ben Wilson, who's Assistant Director of External Relations at the Charity Commission, and he's going to talk about embracing digital innovation.
Thank you, Mark, and good evening, everyone. It's good to be joining you all. As Mark says, I'm Ben Wilson. I'm the Assistant Director here at the Charity Commission. I've previously been in roles in communications and external affairs for the UK Supreme Court and the National Infrastructure Commission. And in my spare time, I'm also a trustee of 2 small charities. So I hope I know of what I speak, and it's very good to be with you. I'm just going to share my screen, which will take me a second. Bear with me. Actually, Angela, I think I'm having a technical problem, which of course is particularly embarrassing on a. It would have to happen to me on a webinar about a digitally informed charity work. But Angela, if you were able to help me with slides, that would be great.
Absolutely. Just bear with me a second.
Thank you. I'll push on in the interest of time while we sort that out. You may well be aware that in each of your instances, you are one of 170,000 charities in England and Wales. The vast majority of those are very small ones. And looking at the names of some of the people that are on the call tonight, I know that small charities are very well represented this evening. 110,000 of those 170,000 have incomes of less than £50,000. And one of our main jobs here at the Commission is to keep the official register of charities. You may be interested to know that we're currently receiving over 1,000 applications a month for the registration of new charities. Only about half of those are accepted against the legal criteria, but that's a big increase. And interestingly, we think one of the reasons for that increase is people using AI, artificial intelligence, to help support their applications. As individual trustees, you are part of a huge cohort of 700,000 incredible people who give your time, usually freely, to support the work of your charities and ensure it's good governance. So the first thing I want to say this evening is thank you on behalf of the regulator for your time, your expertise, and the service that you provide to your charities, because we could not do our job without you doing your job. So on behalf of the Commission, I do want to say a heartfelt thank you from us. The next slide encapsulates some of what I've been saying. For the history buffs on the call, you may just be interested to know we're talking about digital futures, but the oldest charity on the books was founded in 597 when St. Augustine arrived on a mission from Rome to convert the Anglo-Saxons, and that charity is still on the books today. And next slide, please. Thanks, Angela. So very briefly then, as well as keeping the register, we also provide advice to trustees and engage in sessions like this to explain that advice. We're continually reviewing and updating our guidance with a view to making it more accessible. We do that at a rate of 5 or 6 pieces of guidance a year. Now, that may not sound particularly quick, but these are significant pieces of work that have to involve liaison with legal colleagues and others, and we're constantly trying to make them quicker and more accessible. We offer video presentations for much of our guidance now, which you can use as part of your board meeting. So do check out our website for that. Of course, we do, though, as regulator, have to take action where things go wrong. Our powers in that area are set out in statute, but I won't dwell on that this evening. Finally, we publish information on charities. You will all upload your annual report and accounts to us, and we therefore become the authoritative source of that information. But we also use the information that you very kindly provide through your annual returns to present a picture of the sector to government and to other stakeholders. And I'll just quickly say, relating to our theme this evening, we as an organisation, you won't be surprised to hear, are exploring how we might use AI to become more efficient. We're particularly beginning to scope out how we might speed up the registration process. I've touched on the volume of incoming applications we're receiving, and we think there's high potential there for AI to support that process. Next slide, please, and I'll move on to the heart of my presentation for you. The main thing I want to stress this evening is that the Commission sees great potential in digital technology in helping you deliver your charity objects and serve your beneficiaries. So we are seeing examples of charities making their fundraising activities become more efficient and more targeted. It can speed up bid writing, grant applications. It can help identify areas of need and the efficient delivery of frontline services. So artificial intelligence, we think, does have a huge role to play. And the Commission isn't here to stand in the way of that. Of course, we want there to be appropriate safeguards in place, and we'll come on to say a word about that. But we wouldn't want people to hold back from embracing the opportunities here for fear that the Commission took some kind of antediluvian position that you shouldn't be exploring it. You absolutely should be exploring it. It's not our job to run your charities for you or second guess the decisions that you make. It is simply our job to ensure that you fulfill your duties under law as responsible stewards of charitable assets. And the main way that we would say you should do that is, as trustees, is to become adept at asking the right questions of yourselves as a board, but also of your staff if you do employ people. And the questions could usefully be informed by the 7 factors that are on this slide. And these have been developed through the courts as decision-making principles that, in the very unlikely event you were challenged, we would expect you to be able to demonstrate. So I'll take these in turn. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, from a charity law perspective, is that when you are considering any kind of digital or technological development or a major capital project, you should be checking to ensure that it supports your charitable purpose and falls within the powers of your governing document. You may call that your constitution or your articles of association, but essentially your governing document. And as you know, we at the Commission place great store by those objects as the guiding vision for how you should be spending your resources and assets. Ross earlier talked about kind of focusing on the why rather than the how, and I think we would reinforce that. So the second point is about acting in good faith. It's honest intentions when you're evaluating technology options or projects. Be open as a board about what you do and don't understand. You should be choosing solutions based on what's best for your charity, not of course, because, for instance, someone on the board happens to know a particular supplier. Third point is about being sufficiently informed, and that, again, perhaps to Ross's earlier point, it doesn't mean that we expect everybody, or indeed there to be a named digital expert on a board. But what it does mean is, as a collective, you should be gathering enough relevant information to make a sound decision, and that may of course involve asking questions of potential suppliers or seeking professional advice, either pro bono or paid. We absolutely understand as a regulator that you can't all be IT specialists. What matters from our perspective is that you make reasonable efforts to understand what you're deciding. Fourthly, is about taking account of relevant factors, and this means kind of considering the full picture of costs, benefits, risks, the impact on your beneficiaries, and reputational implications if things went wrong. So again, for a new digital project, that might be about thinking about ongoing costs, data security, and whether you believe that your charity actually has the capacity to deliver it successfully, and how you as trustees are going to kind of monitor that and have abilities to have milestones to ensure that the project is staying on track. Next is disregarding irrelevant factors. may seem a slightly odd thing to include, but this is one of the things that the courts have set down. This is about requiring that you set aside any personal preferences or prejudices. We all know there will be some people on boards who are obsessed with change and want to transform everything. Equally, there'll be those who don't want anything to change. Both of those preferences should be disregarded when you're trying to make a fact-based decision in the best interests of your charity. So that's about focusing on what genuinely serves your charity's best interests. And then conflicts of interests, of course, means being alert to any situation where you think any individual trustee might benefit personally from any decision you're making. I'm sure you all have processes for declaring conflicts and managing them appropriately. And in this instance, that might be if someone were involved with any of the suppliers that you were considering, or some way in a relevant business, then they might need to recuse themselves from the discussion or any votes. And then finally, and I hope this offers some kind of reassurance to you, we accept that there will rarely be one perfect answer when it comes to some of these questions about how you deploy technology. What matters is that your choice falls within the range of decisions that a reasonable board might make based on the information available to you at the time. And I would just finish by saying, with the advent of AI, and we're all probably beginning to get to grips with it both personally and professionally, as trustees, you must remember that ultimately you are accountable for decision making in your charity. So it's really important that any decisions that you do delegate to AI, that there is the ability for you to override that, and that you should not be making decisions based on AI alone, but that there is some human interaction in that. And indeed, just as you would with any other process of significant decision making within the organisation, that you have the opportunity to oversee and assure that process. Next slide, please. And of course, I'll be very happy to take questions in a few moments' time. Please don't feel aghast when you look at this slide. I absolutely don't expect you to be able to read it. You'll be pleased to hear this content is freely available on our website, and I know Charity Digital will include a link. But this is a checklist that we've developed for charities considering developing a social media policy. And policies are a really important part of your toolkit as trustees. If you are thinking about AI, then it's probably a good idea for you to be thinking about an AI policy. I'll be clear, it's not a regulatory requirement that you have one, but if there were issues further down the line, and heaven forbid, you were challenged by a complainant and it got to us, we would wonder whether you had a policy and would ask you questions about how you'd implemented that policy. So we have developed this checklist, which, as I say, you can find freely online. I'll pull out a couple of the key points. We would suggest that a policy for social media would, for instance, usefully cover your guidelines around the conduct of trustees, of staff and volunteers when they are using social media on behalf of the charity, guidance on how you will engage with the public on social media, for example, your rules on moderating external comments that are posted onto your channel, and then who and how you would act if things went wrong, and at what point would the trustees be involved in that decision making. So in the interest of time, I won't go any further into that, but very happy to take questions, and as I say, it's freely available resource on our website. As I draw to a close and want to leave good time for questions, I would just say I fully endorse what Ross said earlier about trustee recruitment. Looking at the options for online recruitment portals as a way of attracting kind of talented, committed people, we are we are very keen to encourage charities to look at advertising for trustees. We know the temptation can be to pull from known networks, and some governing documents do limit the pool, as Ross touched on, around location. But if you can be flexible on that, then we have a number of stories of charities that have recruited people who have brought a great range of skills in. And if you need to change your governing document to help that happen, then by all means, make that decision, vote it through, and then lodge it with us. I wouldn't mind, sorry, Angela, if you could just take me to my final slide. Sorry, I wasn't very clear. I just want to finish on my last slide to really conclude on what this is all about, really. Ultimately, the reason that we would encourage you to think about governance around AI and social media and other technologies is ultimately failures in this area could risk undermining support for you, your charity, but also trust in the wider sector. So if people were given cause to think that the use of technology wasn't supporting the delivery of your objects or undermining your political independence or whatever, that's when we would start to be concerned. But the good news, as I hope I've set out briefly this evening, is that by following relatively straightforward common sense principles around decision making and thinking about what policies it would be helpful for you to have in place, you can protect against those issues. And at the heart of what we do at the Commission is try and help the public support charities with confidence. And I'm pleased to say, as you can see on this final slide, that charities are among the most trusted institutions in the country, second only to medical doctors. And that is because of the great work of you and your colleagues in delivering on your objects. We're in a very strong position as a sector, and with your continued support and voluntary effort, we at the Commission aim to help you continue to build on that. I'll stop there and very happy to take questions.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for that. There's one question up already from Speakers Collective. Do you have any AI policies that you can share?
So this is a question we often get asked, and I'll be very honest and say we have consciously at the Commission decided not to develop a template policy or provide detailed guidance at this stage on AI. That's partly because when we do that, we find that for smaller charities, it can seem a bit overbearing and prescriptive. And for larger charities, it sometimes doesn't give them enough. And we're slightly stuck in the middle. I think also, if we produced an AI policy 6 months ago, it would have already looked extremely out of date. So I hope you'll forgive me for slightly dodging the question. It's a bit like when people ask us, for instance, about cryptocurrency. The position is, this is about trustee decision making, right? I've set out some of the principles that you should abide by, and I'm sure Charity Digital and others could point people in the direction of model policies. We haven't provided them, partly because we would worry that people will simply copy and paste them, and we want you to think about this in your own context. And as I've hopefully stressed, it's about how you deliver on your charity objects through those technologies, not kind of vice versa. It's not starting with a solution and working backwards. It's thinking about what are we trying to do as an organisation? How can technology help us do that?
Yeah, thank you. I've got one question. Have you seen any worrying examples of AI deployment that have given you any cause for concern?
It's a really good question. I'm glad that that's been raised, because to reassure people, we haven't. We have not seen examples across our regulatory compliance colleagues of major issues here. I fear, and look, I'm speaking candidly and off the cuff, I fear when it does happen, it will probably be in the fundraising space, where charities perhaps ill-advisedly deploy targeted mechanisms for fundraising, perhaps without some due diligence around that, in the same way that we perhaps saw in the past with mail shots. So again, I'm not saying that as a kind of red flag, but that would be an area that I would worry most about. But I guess encouragingly, we haven't seen problems. I think that's because people are they are treading carefully and cautiously. But as Ross showed us earlier, we know that 78% of charities already say they're using AI. And the one thing that stuck with me, and I've done bits of AI training over the last few months, the one lesson that stuck with me is the biggest mistake you can make with AI is assuming that your people aren't already using it. And that's why having policies in place now is important.
Is important. Yep. I've got one question here. It's come up, John Harwood. Does the Commission use a downloadable AI detector to check when applicants are using AI?
Very good. We don't, because, and I hope I didn't give the wrong steer earlier. There's nothing to stop people using AI to support their applications, and I'm sure that those of you that are applying for grants from grant funders will probably find the same environment. It's so difficult to spot with 100% accuracy that it's a fool's game really to do that. What we do say, though, we look very carefully, and currently we're doing it all from human checking. The team certainly can spot them a mile off, they tell me. That doesn't mean they're automatically rejected, but we do find that the rejection rate for those is higher than for applications that are clearly developed by humans. And it's simply because they're not specific enough. And whilst AI may be very good at kind of giving you generalities and colour, it's not brilliant at saying how a very specific local need is translated then into one of the heads of charity. Now, it will get there, but at the minute we spot it. And as I say, that doesn't mean it's an automatic no, but if it hasn't met the legal criteria for public benefit and meeting one of the objects, then it gets rejected.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Ben. That's a brilliant session. Thank you very much indeed. I know the great work that the Charity Commission does, and that was a great example.
That's very
kind.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thanks. So we'll move on to the last session, and where I'm quite happy to take questions. I agreed with Charity Digital, who asked me if I could say a few words about what we're doing at Bernardo's and at Goodstack. And I'm very happy to do that as an example of how one can go about developing a digital and AI strategy and implementing it. Starting off with Bernardo's. First of all, I mean, Bernardo's is a very large charity, as I'm sure you know. We've got over 7,000 staff. Our turnover is about 350 million. A lot of that comes from care contracts with local authorities, not just from donations and retail. But so it's a large organization, and we decided, actually, in discussion between the board and the executive about 2 years ago, that we thought we needed a digital and an AI director to help us develop and implement a strategy and a proper digital strategy, but also to make use of the tools which are becoming available. And so we hired a brilliant director, who's Matthew Green, who's doing a fantastic job. And just to give you an example of the kinds of things that are now being used, what Matthew has done across the organization is a lot of training of staff on tools which make their work more efficient. Now, for frontline staff, these are the carers, the people on the front line, the men and women looking after children, vulnerable children, teenagers, families in distress. What they've been trained on are two systems: Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, which can help in an awful lot of ways manage everything from diaries to note-taking. But also, what has been very successful is deployment of Magic Notes, which is a very simple note-taking AI system. It's actually a British system as well, which means that carers now, when they have meetings, have interviews, will use one of these two systems. That system will now take down a note of the whole meeting, then discussion, and afterwards the carer can just edit it and file it. And this has been a huge time saving for the frontline staff who previously had to spend a lot of time just typing up reports after every meeting. And it's been very enthusiastically welcomed by the staff. And as Ben was saying, we know that our own staff play around with AI themselves. A lot of them are quite creative, but these systems have enabled them to do their jobs a lot better. We're also using sort of AI tools where we can in administration and in finance, things like invoice processing, and also looking at what we can do in the fundraising and the retail areas. And in fundraising, it's using this tool to start to identify donors and categorize donors in different ways to track the way we are communicating with them and make sure that we are keeping in touch with them properly and giving them good feedback. It's a kind of process of reminding partly, but also managing and categorizing more efficiently than we've done before. And the same with retail, but we've started to use AI to track trends in retail, where we're trying to see how the shops, we've got nearly 500 shops around the UK, how these are performing and what is performing, what is doing well and what isn't. So these are simple tools. But I thought the ones about Magic Notes and Copilot, we've deployed them, but these are tools that can be deployed by any charity of any size. They're very easy to get to know. A good IT director will quickly grasp what can be done with them. So that's one area that I think is going to change a lot. When we're also now looking, the challenge comes, and this is for all trustees is the challenge. How does the board effectively oversee and challenge in this area, oversee what's being done and challenge? We have 2 or 3 trustees who are, including me, who are reasonably technically capable and can ask the right questions. We have within the organization the head of risk management is actually the biggest challenger. He keeps an eagle eye on deployment of AI and makes absolutely sure that it's within our own risk framework and that we're not opening up the organization to risk of cyber attack, for example. So that's an internal balance. But we are now wrestling with the issue at board level. Do we and as we discussed earlier, as Ross discussed, do we bring in an expert trustee who's somebody who's an expert in AI, or do we go for an advisory role? And we are going to evaluate both. We've actually had some interesting engagement with companies like Google, where we can see that we could certainly get volunteers for an advisory role. Harder to get these experts to commit to a full trustee role. So we may end up going that way. But we do want to get that expertise feeding into the board so that the board can feel comfortable that it's not only being informed by the executive about what's going on, but has enough expertise around the board table to be able to ask the right questions. And that's what we're doing there. Now, I'll also just mention Good Stack. I chair that. It's a tech startup. Some of you will have come across it. Good Stack manages validations of non-profits, of charities for Google, Canva, Microsoft, to enable charities to access the discounts. I mean, you may be aware Google offers a discount of $10,000 a month of cost-free advertising for charities. But to qualify for that, you have to be authenticated, which is what we do. We also manage funding distribution for the likes of TikTok and run workplace giving platforms. But one area we're developing, which may be of interest, is in services for non-profits, for charities to help them. And we launched about 3 or 4 months back on a pilot scheme, something called a grant finder. It's an AI grant finder, which helps charities identify grants which may be suitable for them. And I think we've actually now got a database of something like 40,000 grants worldwide. And charities can go on and put in their criteria, they'll get returns on which kind of grant givers and funds, foundations are providing grants which may be relevant. And the tool will also then help write the application. And we want to do more things like that. And we're not the only ones doing these things, by the way, but there are these platforms now like ours, which are trying to develop tools to help charities access funding more easily or manage their administration more easily. So I think there's going to be a lot happening in this space with specialist companies offering support, which will save charities the money. The objective all the time is to help charities raise money, but also to save money on operations and administration. So just to flag those things, but I think the most important thing is just to flag that what Bernardo's, I think we're not the only big charity which is doing this on a large scale, but I think Bernardo's has done this well, and I'm quite happy to give any more information if people need any more and want to know any more. So I think with that, right, I've got a question here. Oh, the AI grant finder. If you go to the website is Goodstack, as in GOODSTACK.io. And I think you'll find it. Actually, if you just put in Google Goodstack Grant Finder, it'll take you there. So quite simple to get to. And please get your charities to have a look. We've got a lot of very happy charities who've been using it. Are there any other questions? If not, I will just close by saying a big thank you to our 3 contributors, Ross, Johanna and Ben. I thought those were 3 excellent sessions. Thank you to Maria and Angela at Charity Digital for organising this. I thought it was an excellent evening and very helpful for charity trustees. We all bear a responsibility, which is quite awesome sometimes when you think about it. We have to make sure our charities are doing all the right things, moving forward, using all the right tools, but they have to be careful. So thank you to all of those very helpful sessions. And I'll just repeat, I think it was on June the 3rd, was it? There's a face-to-face session. Yeah, 3rd of June, an in-person trustee event in London. So put that in your diaries. Thank you very much. Feedback welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks to everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye.